Welcome to the Unconventional Path, Entrepreneurship and Innovation Stories and Ideas. Hi, I'm bela.and.mike.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Today's guest is Robert Mixon. He is a retired Major General in the Army, where he served for over 3 decades in various different leadership positions, including commanding the 7th Infantry Division. So that's really a big accomplishment. Now what he does is he's an executive leadership coach for a lot of different organizations and has started a company called Level 5 Associates after his retirement from the Army. So it was an interesting conversation we had, Mike, about executive coaching and how that can help their various different folks and organizations.
Yeah, Bela, a little different background from a lot of the guests we've had. We've had several different people that do coaching and we've had a few guests over the years that have come from a military background, but this is really kind of a first for us. We've both known and taught a lot of military veterans, and I'm a big fan of trying to find ways to transfer some of the lessons that are learned from the military into the private sector. And I guess I'm one of the 95% of people that you'll hear about that Robert talks about that hasn't served in the military. But I've worked with a lot of veterans and taught a lot of veterans. And I think not everything in the military model is relevant to the private sector. But I think there's a heck of a lot there that managers and especially entrepreneurs can learn from the military in terms of processes and structures and managing people and this kind of alignment of strategies and tactics and metrics. So I'm really interested to hear your conversation with Robert. So let's get right to it, shall we?
Yeah, sounds good, Mike. I thought it was a real interesting conversation. Let's get right into it.
So I'm actually on my boat and at a marina. And there's a storm coming. So I thought that instead of having thunder and lightning in the background, if we can move it up a little bit, it'll make things a little calmer.
Yeah, well, it probably makes sense, Bela.
Yeah, great. Hey, so Robert, tell me a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, I was privileged to be a soldier for 33 years in the United States Army, and then served in various corporate positions, responsibility in a for-profit, not-for-profit companies, and then started my own company, Level 5 Associates, about 7 years ago to provide individuals and organizations with leadership tools that they could apply, practical leadership tools and strategic planning, and do some one-on-one executive coaching as well to help leaders build a roadmap for their way ahead. So my company is really, I think, designed to be a trusted advisor based on my life and leadership experiences.
Yeah. I really, although I was too naive or too cocky, I'm not sure which one, but in my career, I never had an executive coach. But reflecting back on it, I can see how having someone to sort of help you see things in various ways is really important. And I wish I would have had that in my career, because I reflect back on it, I can see that sometimes I clearly had blinders on. And if I would have had somebody there with me, because when you're running an organization, sometimes it is lonely. You're the only one. There's certain things you can't talk to other people about, and having that confidant that you can speak to and bounce things off, I think is really important. And it really goes underutilized, I think.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I would have greatly benefited from a trusted advisor throughout my military and corporate career. They basically had the attitude as you move to higher levels of responsibility, at least in many cultures, to figure it out. I figured it out as a colonel and a general, so you can figure it out. I figured it out as the president of a company, so you can figure it out. But in reality, right. A trusted advisor is a tremendous ally, because he or she can be your accountability buddy. They don't have skin in the game per se, in that they're not in your direct report chain, but they are someone who has offered to be a sounding board, to be again, I said, an accountability buddy, to help you plot a pathway towards the goals you want to achieve, and then achieve
Yeah.
them. And I think that's a wonderful asset. I'm a little biased in that regard, but the people I've been privileged to work with have expressed, I think, appreciation because they seem to be making progress and they seem to value the relationship.
Yeah. And it's interesting, or at least I find it interesting, that in the sports world, there are many individuals who have sort of private coaches and take advantage of that. But for some reason in the business world, it's sometimes almost interpreted as a sign of weakness. Oh, you need a, we talk about mentors, but they're a little bit different.
It is. It's different. And I think in the business world, we have a tendency to push back against being vulnerable. No business leader wants to say, well, he or she is vulnerable, when in reality we all are. And I think it's a trait of outstanding leadership to admit you have vulnerabilities, to admit
Yes.
that you have some times when you don't feel as confident as you might otherwise, or you want to take counsel of your fears. And I think a coach can help you mitigate some of those tendencies and be vulnerable, and I think be more genuine as a leader with others.
Yeah. This podcast is predominantly listened to by entrepreneurs, small business owners, and not executives of Fortune 500 companies. And I think for entrepreneurs, it's even more challenging because oftentimes they're doing something that hasn't been done before. They're not part of a corporate world where there's processes and procedures on how to do things, and there's this culture on how to interact. They're inventing it as they go along. So I think this notion of for entrepreneurs is even more of a challenge.
I think so too. And I've been a small business owner now for a number of years. I work with, some entrepreneurs and other leaders of small companies who are trying to find their edge and build out from it, figure out how to bring their product or service to the marketplace. They feel the passion and the value for it, but they're working hard to convince others of the value proposition. And so that can create, I think, some anxieties as well. And sometimes that, I think a trusted advisor could be very valuable to an entrepreneur as he or she tries to navigate the world of, competitive business.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Robert, do you have a sweet spot that you sort of do this with from an industry perspective or a size of the business perspective, et cetera?
I work with the executives really that run the gamut from having a couple of dozen people on their team to having 4,000 or 5,000 on their team. I don't work with the mega company executives, with a couple of exceptions, only because the bandwidth is the issue. I really don't want to try to be an executive coach who provides value to 50 men and women when I know that it would be very hard for me to provide the same level of value to each person. I'd rather work with 20. 15 or 20 would be my sweet spot on say every 4 to 6 weeks, or every couple of months, couple of hours together. I think then you can provide a quality experience. So my sweet spot would be that number or range of executives, but I'm agnostic about the type of industry per se. I think the leadership challenges we face in an entrepreneurial context or innovative context, inside an organization, they run the gamut of industry, manufacturing, services, for-profit, not-for-profit. I really don't draw a line anywhere in that regard, as long as you have the right values. And I say the right values because my company, Level 5 Associates, our mantra is, we provide values-based leadership that works, and it's based on the right values. So that would be my primary criteria: is do you and I share what I believe are the right values?
Yes. Very nice. And when you think about, can you describe one of these engagements? So sort of, how does it start? How do you, get going? How long does it last? What are sort of the typical types of things that you do? Yeah,
I think we could draw a straw man here, Bella, of what
that'd be great.
What executive coaching program looks like, but at least with level 5 with me. We start with an interview session is the first engagement, where I'll ask a number of questions to determine who you are and what you represent. I encourage people to start to develop a personal mission statement and a personal leadership philosophy, which distills that mission statement into a more discrete values and expectations and behaviors. And so we'll begin to build that in our first session, that personal mission statement and leadership philosophy. And then based on that document, or I call it document, on that document, we'll build a roadmap. And the roadmap usually has a 3-year pathway. And we'll start with the end in mind and say, okay, in 3 years, based on your philosophy, based on who you are and what you represent, what do you want to be? Sort of a miniature version of what do you want to be when you grow up?
Sure.
And and they describe their personal and professional 3-year end state. You know, what they want to be, who they want to be, what they want their team to look like, what they want their culture to look like, their ecosystem. And then we'll work backwards from the 3 years to now at intervals to determine what interim objectives have to be met in order for that end state 3 years to come to life. And we'll also examine together some of the concerns they have about what's holding them back. And so, you know, it has to be a trusted relationship. So I think we have to get to some of the tough conversations about not only who they are and what they represent, but what's their environment look like, and what are the challenges they face in influencing others in this environment, because leadership is about influence. And so learning how to influence is a whole lot tougher than figuring out how to be directive. If we just want to be directive, we can walk around and give instructions to people, and that doesn't take a whole lot of depth. You do it from a recipe. But this is art, not science. And so as we build the roadmap from the mission statement, the personal leadership philosophy, then I interact with the leader, the person, interval about every 4 to 6 weeks for 1 to 2 hours. We'll get together, and either in person or virtually. I much prefer in person, but you know, we live in the world we're in, so it's tougher these days. And we'll meet at that interval, and then once we've laid the track, we'll try to run the train down the track and establish metrics, because I think that which is measured gets done. So we'll put the 3-year end state, and it's really an interim end state, but we'll call it end state for now. And we'll put metrics against it that become more discrete as you come backwards in time towards the present, so that we learn to think strategically and act tactically with metrics that you can look at and say, okay, I did this or I didn't do that, or I accomplished this goal or I didn't accomplish that goal, and if not, what am I going to do about it? So it's a framework for progress that has metrics associated with it, and I think the value proposition is that it's not written in stone, and if we need to fix or adjust the track, the roadmap, then we adjust it together, but it's based on a common vision of what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, is this a process or methodology that you came up with on your own? Is it something that you go to school for? I'm not sure. I don't understand how all this works.
Well, there are definitely educational programs such as the Sherpa program and others where you can learn how to facilitate a coaching experience. Yes. I have not gone that route. Basically, I was coached by some very bright, talented people, and I took from them some of their best practices. I got some input from others that I observed, and so I built this model based on my own experiential journey.
Yeah, excellent. I think those are the best kind for sure. So I'm curious to sort of talk a little bit about, you spent a significant amount of time of your life in the military, and then you transition to sort of the corporate world. And before you talked about influence versus sort of command and telling people what to do. So how was that transition for you when you made this change from sort of the military to corporate life?
Well, the change wasn't as dramatic as I think some people make it out to be, because the military is much more of a collegial, collaborative environment than I think some people have stereotyped us to be. And part of it is because more than 95% of adult Americans have never served in the military. And that's just a demographic. So that means 9.5 out of 10 people in a room have never had the experience of being a soldier, a sailor, airman, or Marine. So we don't know what they don't know. And in the military, there is a culture of collaboration that's highly encouraged among young leaders early on. And yet, when the decision is made, and when the mission, we receive the mission, and decision is made on how we're going to conduct the mission, which is the collaborative part of it.
Yes.
And we go out and execute it. The loyalty factor is very, very high. When I transitioned to the military or the corporate world, I found that loyalty level wasn't as high. And it was because we didn't have people who were really steeped in the culture of the company. And some of them considered it to be a job and not a career path or a way of life. And as a result, they took more of a superficial view of the level of commitment. That as soldiers, we had a much deeper level of commitment.
Yeah.
And building that trust and buy-in in the companies I was in was a priority. And you had to put a lot of focus into building that mutual trust and loyalty in order to have the kind of buy-in that we had in the military, because we were soldiers and we'd taken an oath, and we had the framework of duty, honor, and country, which was part of our persona, if you will.
Yes.
That was a challenge for me.
Yes.
There were times when people would smile and nod and then go do something completely different, which I was not used to, and I had to work my way through that. And there were times when I was bitterly disappointed because I thought that we had some agreement or alignment, and I found out that was very superficial. It was only for that moment. And if I didn't dive deeper and work harder at it to set conditions before we had the decision, or sort of the meeting before the meeting and not the meeting after the meeting, then we could come up with a course of action that we were all willing to sign up for and be part of. That was the big differences I found, Bela, in my transition. And I encourage the leaders that I work with now to never take that loyalty for granted, that they've got to nurture it on a daily basis if they really want to have the kind of buy-in and loyalty that great companies have. The difference between good ones and great ones is great companies have that loyalty and buy-in in their culture, and the good ones really don't.
Yeah, that was really well said. That was rang to my ears as you were speaking that, and I was reflecting back on various different experiences that I've had in my life, and I said, oh yeah, that's one of those where there's the meeting and then there's the meeting after the meeting.
Yeah.
Right.
Painful.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah. So as you engage with various different people in this sort of coaching space, what are some of the common challenges that you see, or common issues that you see that if you had to summarize 3 or 4 things, what would they be?
I think the common challenges that I've seen, both my individual executive coaching and in the team work that I do with my workshops built around the Big 6 principles. The common themes are, first of all, you tend to be unrealistic about who you are. There's a common saying that there are 3 yous. Mm-hmm. There's the you that you think you are, there's the you that others think you are, and there's the real you. Well, most of us like door number 1. We like the you we think. Yeah. We tend to dismiss what others think of us. Some leaders go completely the opposite side, and all they want to do is please everybody around them, and they really don't have much self-confidence. And that's not a healthy you either. It's really the blending of the two into that third persona that separates or helps you really know yourself. And that's why the development of the personal mission and personal leadership philosophy is so powerful. It's difficult to do, but it's very powerful because it helps you reconcile those 3 U's. And I see that as a common thread. Many people have never done that reconciliation. They like the first one and they really are not interested in the second one, or they don't want to entertain the second one because they might not like what they hear. And so that's one thread I would give you, Bella, that runs across industries and leaders, is that, as Jack Nicholson said, "A Few Good Men, you can't handle the truth." So they really don't want to confront the truth because they don't have to. And I think it's those that do usually find their lives are more rewarding because they do. But you have to make that first step. You have to have, again, that coach or that advisor to help you make that first step in a trusted way so that, you can be a little vulnerable. The second thread that I notice among leaders is that they don't want to have difficult conversations. And so they don't. And I never fired anybody in my career where somebody didn't come up to me the next day and say, "Robert, what took you so long?" He was toxic. He was not pulling his weight. He was, spreading rumors and muddying the waters here of our culture. And we all knew that, but you just kept him on. Well, I kept him on in many ways because I didn't want to have that difficult conversation. I'm avoiding having that, the important discussion that, hey, this, you're not a fit. You don't fit into who we are and what we're trying to do. And, you need to move into another pathway in your life. And thanks for what you've done. So that's another tendency I see is, they don't actively address the real you. They don't proactively have the difficult conversations that are needed in an organization to maintain, I think, people's buy-in, because they know that you're gonna support their effort, but you're not going to tolerate mediocrity or substandard performance and behavior. And I would say the third one is that they don't have the level of persistence they need to grow. Leadership is hard. It's tough work. As my old boss, General Tommy Franks, used to say, it's adult work. And bringing it day in, day out, week in, week out, is very hard for many leaders. They default back to the supervisory role or the directive activity because influence is hard work. And there are days when you really get frustrated with it and say that, this is a big pain in my butt. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to go back to just saying, here's your order, here's your orders, here's your instructions, here's what the process says, here's what the order parameters are, just go do it. So those three are tendencies, Bella, that I see in leaders, all of which you can overcome. But in many cases, you need some help to do it.
Yeah. Now, while you were speaking about this, you mentioned a workshop. So you also do sort of a workshop that people can come to as opposed to getting individual coaching?
I do. I conduct leadership workshops for teams of leaders, preferably less than 20 in size, because I want it to be a very personal, interactive experience. These are half-day workshops built around my big 6 principles to help you put tools in your toolbox to apply the principles.
Got it.
First principle is set the azimuth. What's our cardinal direction? And how do I go about setting that azimuth with the team? The second principle is listen. As my mom said, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, but I didn't pay much attention to that for much of my career. I can tell you the most effective leaders are effective listeners. The third principle is trust and empower. And, we talk about trust and empowerment's the embodiment of trust. I don't think we're very skilled at how to bring it to life. And so that, the workshops are built around that principle. The fourth one is do the right thing when no one's looking. And as we used to say in the Pentagon, that briefs well. It's much more difficult to do it than say it. And then the fifth principle is when in charge, take charge. How do you become in charge? It doesn't mean that you're loud and profane. And we've all seen the movie Patton. That's not the kind of leadership principle I'm talking about today. We have to be the calm in the chaos. We have to be the one who puts the other principles in effect to create an environment where people feel as though they belong and they're trusted. They're not coddled, but they feel as though they belong. Yeah. And the sixth principle is balance. we talk about work-life balance and number of hours of one or the other. That's not what I'm talking about. Balance is about energy. It's about having the 4 levels of energy inside you to be, as we say in the Army, be all you can be. And those batteries are physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. If those batteries are charged inside each of us, then we perform at our highest level, and we serve people as leaders more effectively. It just helps us have the type of healthy perspective and healthy approach that I think the people we lead deserve. So the workshops are built around those 6 principles, and they're usually half day long. And I put them in usually 4 to 6 week intervals, or maybe even 2 or 3 months, depending on the location, because you need time to process the tools from each workshop.
Yeah.
Just fire hose somebody. Here's 2.5 days of workshops and 6 principles and 40 tools in the toolbox. Then you just overwhelm them, and none of it sticks.
Right. Very nice. Now, do you do that within one organization, or do you bring people together from various different organizations to do those workshops?
I prefer to do them with one organization in the group. I've done some open workshops, and I think they can be effective to a point. But I much prefer having a team that is, a team of people that work together, and they can practice those tools and use each other as sort of battle buddies here in the process of application of tools. That's my favorite way of doing it.
Yeah, very, very nice. Now, Robert, I'm going to start wrapping this up here. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should have asked you?
Well, I'm not sure, Bella, other than your message to entrepreneurs. I think what I would feel as though might be helpful is that, the entrepreneurial spirit is really, I think, promoted through collaboration. And entrepreneurs who reach out to other entrepreneurs and share experiences or challenges, in my view, have a much higher chance of success than those who are simply lone wolves out there, alone and unafraid. So I would encourage those in the audience, in your audience, Bella, to be collaborative. Seek out others who have gone down the path you're on or are going down the path you're on, and communicate with them, share with them. And that's the value of, for example, the podcast we're on. It's an ability to share and learn from each other.
Yeah. Well said. So, Robert, if people want to find you and reach out to you, what's the best way to do that?
Great. Yeah. My website is www.level5associates.com. Spell out the 5. Go to the website, you'll see what products and services I have there, a little bit about my journey. You'll see a library of the blogs I've done, a couple of hundred of them over the past few years. Some podcasts that I've done where I've interviewed some other leaders or been a guest on other podcasts. And you can contact me there, or you can write me an email at robert@level5associates.com. And I guarantee I'm someone who looks at my emails and responds to them. Everything doesn't go in the junk folder, and I even check the junk folder too. So every day.
Well, that's great. Robert, thank you so much for being on the podcast. You've been a wonderful guest. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thanks, Bella. Wish you well. Stay safe.
Bela, well, that was really an interesting interview. What struck you as most interesting in your talk?
Mike, this is one of those things where, regardless of his point of view, I think one of the things that we often do not think about is coaching, leadership coaching. And the analogy I draw is in sports, all top performers have coaches. And they have folks that are sort of third parties that kind of watch from the outside and can kind of make observations and suggestions that, and they're not sort of tied up in the day-to-day stuff that happens in life. And I think in business, we often don't think about this. We just say, you got to figure it out on your own. So, read some books and figure it out on your own. Well, tennis players don't figure it out on their own. Golf players don't figure it out on their own. right? Football players have coaches. They have all sorts of coaches on a football team.
Right?
Yeah,
Multiple coaches.
Right. Right. So I think there's this thing that in business we sort of ignore this notion. We think, well, in business we're smart and we'll just figure it out. So I reflect back on my own career. I mean, there have been multiple times now that I'm retired, I can reflect back and say, you know what? It would have been good if I had somebody sitting on my shoulder saying, Bela, you're screwing up here. You're not focused on the right things. Or Bela, there's got to be a better way to say that would be more productive and more helpful. And I just think we, as society in general, as business folks in general, we overlook this. And so I think there's value in it. That was sort of my big observation. What did you think, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. I'm a little bit more skeptical than you are about executive coaches or leadership coaches, because I think there just isn't a common body of knowledge on how to coach and what are the knowledge and skills that good leaders need. It's such a big, diverse kind of field. I think that there's a lot of overlap between what we look at as mentoring and what we might define as coaching, and how are they separate and how are they the same? And I think they are different, but you don't see a lot of really good research or a lot of real clarity or a general agreement, even among the people that do this, on, okay, what should I look for in a coach? What knowledge and skills should I be asking for? I know that there's some membership groups, right, that have kind of some certifications and give some training, which is great. That's a good first step. But I think there's a lot of variance out there in terms of what's available. So my sense is that, and what Robert said made great sense to me, and I really liked a lot of the things that he said. But I always tell people when they ask me, Mike, do you know any good coaches, or should I get a coach, or what do you think? I'm always a little bit skeptical, and I think it's actually I'm always big into mental health, and I'm big into encouraging people to go to therapy. It's a lot like finding a good therapist, that there's different styles of therapists, and you have to find one that fits you, right? And sometimes you might have to go to 3 or 4 to find one that you really gel with. Or getting your haircut, right? There's lots of different places to get your haircut, right? And you have to keep trying until you find one that kind of you gel with and you mesh with. So I think coaching is probably the same way that you look at this. A mentor, on the other hand, to me is a little more long lasting. I might go to one coach for 3 or 4 specific skills that I want to work at: public speaking, negotiation, hiring and firing people, or evaluating talent, right? I can think of some specific things where, yes, a coach is going to say, Mike, you need to practice these things. Let's do some exercises, give you some role playing, give you some practicing, and then you go do it, and we'll evaluate your performance and try to get you better, right? That's coaching. Mentoring is more like, Bela, what are your career goals, and how are we going to get you there, and who can I share my network with, and let me give you some feedback or some different ways maybe you might want to approach that next time. And I think a good mentor, a lot of ways, kind of grows with you over time, because it's a real personal relationship. And to me, a lot of coaches, when they have a big stable, right, like, okay, I have these 5 things that I'll give you, and when you got them, it's probably time to move on to a different coach, right? Yeah. The same thing, like an athlete doesn't stay necessarily with the same coach their whole career, right? Right. And there's a difference there. If you look at, players move, sometimes the change of scenery, right, when a player goes from team A to team B, is really a change in coaching. Right? Yeah. No, I think I agree with you, Mike. I think a lot of this has to do with, it's a relationship, right? It's a relationship between you and this other person. And and that relationship needs to work, which means there needs to be some trust. There needs to be this ability to kind of push on each other and poke each other, and still respect, each other's opinion. You need to mesh. And I think you said it too. I think you as the individual need to be clear about what you're trying to achieve, and whether it be, hey, I want to improve my speaking skills. I want to improve my interpersonal, meet and greet skills, whatever it is. And you want to, then I think the more specific you are, I think the faster you can zoom in on someone who can provide that type of training or coaching, whatever you want to call it. And it is interesting that it's a profession. Coaching profession is one that is not really well structured. At least I'm not aware of various different certificate. I'm sure there's certifications. There are some.
but there's no like one unifying body, which is interesting. So for example, in the ski racing world, if you want to coach 6 and 7-year-old kids, you need to go get a certification to coach young kids. I mean, kids who've never raced before in their life, right? So the United States Ski Association has this sort of coaching structure that as a coach, there's entry points, you can get training, you can get certified, and you can coach folks. And here too, there's, you eventually you end up, coaching the Olympic team. So it's interesting that, maybe that's part of the challenge too, is that I wouldn't know where to go, right? I would call other people, hey, do you have a coach? Who do you use? Right? It's like in many ways, it's like finding a psychiatrist. It's like, who do you use? Who do you go to? Or what dentist do you use? Right? It's this network of your friends that sort of make these recommendations. But I do think there's value in it, and totally. I think there's value in it, and we often overlook it. And I think in my mind, I don't have such a clear delineation as you do between a mentor and a coach. I think you articulated it well, so it's clearer now in my head than it was before we started this conversation. But I think there is some overlap. But I really do think you need to build that trust that goes back to that relationship. And anyway, I just thought it was really good.
Yeah, totally
it's a good topic. It's a good topic that people should consider.
Totally agree. And I know several people that have really benefited from a good coach, and I think, were there any of Robert's specific principles that resonated with you? He kind of brought up several, and I thought they were interesting, a little different than the way I view things, but this is why you want a coach, right? To give you some different perspectives.
Yeah. So none of them resonated with me. It's like, ooh, wow, that was really cool. But I think your point's a good one here. Part of the what I would be looking for in a coach is for me to look at the same painting, right, the same image, but look at it from different perspectives. Because I know I don't do that very well. I sort of get tunneled in, and I drive to a solution really fast.
Engineer.
Yep. Right. And I do that, and I know that's a weakness I have, and I jump to conclusions really quick, and it's hard for me to self-manage that. I haven't developed the skills. I mean, aware of it, but there's a difference between being aware and managing it. Whereas if I had a coach, right, who kind of reminded me of that once every other week when we got together, where we talked about maybe things that happened, that would bring it more to top of my mind, which then would help me manage it and change my behavior patterns. Because that's what we're really talking about, totally. Here, is modifying behavior patterns. Yeah. And those are really hard to do. It's hard to modify behavior patterns.
And a good coach is going to work with you to say, okay, when you see this is how you need to respond, and let's practice. Right. And it's like a drill. It's like I don't golf and I don't like golfing, but it's like a putting coach, right? Saying, okay, put your hands here, put your feet here, you know what I mean, right? Shift your weight at this time, right. And now do it 1,000 times. And then you can just walk up there and do it, right? Under pressure.
Right. And you use the word practice, which I think is great, right? Because we practice in sports all the time. Even if you're a musician, you practice music all the time.
We don't practice managing enough.
We don't practice managing. Right.
I think a great coach will give you that opportunity.
Right. We go get an MBA, but an MBA is really not practicing. It's knowledge. It's not practicing. Right. There's a difference.
Right. There's a little bit of it. You and I both have tried to really do experiential learning based teaching and get students out into the field, and there's an element of practice there, but the vast majority of most MBA programs in the US at least you're in the classroom and you're memorizing stuff and you're doing math and you're solving business and case studies are supposed to be practice, right? Harvard cases and other cases. Right. But even now, you and I both know half the time the students are just going on the web and finding the solution and bringing it to class, right? That's,
Right. And, if you think about some other professions like doctors and lawyers, after graduation, they do internships. In medicine, it's called a residency.
And it's practice,
and
supervised
you know,
practice.
Right, exactly. It's supervised practice, but we don't do that in sort of business, which I find interesting. It sort of happens haphazardly, like
Right.
your
Or
coworkers
randomly,
say,
right? We're
"Don't
lucky,
do that."
Right? Right. You did it again, Mike. Right.
So
Stop saying
anyway,
that. Right.
it's interesting.
Yeah. But I think good coaches help you do that, right? They work
Yes.
through it, and and that's one of many things. So, I think it's great to do this in terms of especially I think if you have some goals in your career and you're having trouble meeting them, it's sometimes really great to say, you know what, my career isn't advancing in the way that I want it to be, or I like parts of my job, but parts of my job are making me unhappy. And I think a great coach can help you recognize what parts are unhappy. And again, like you said, change some behaviors or some actions to reduce the negative parts of your job and enhance the positive parts of your job. Coaches are great there. I know a lot of people, there's certain things about their job they can't stand, but they're not moving. You know what I mean? Right. For a variety of reasons, they're staying. So how can you use a coach to help make your job more fulfilling and make you more effective, and right, a win-win. So lots of reasons why coaches can really help you. I do think some people need a mental health counselor and they go to a coach instead, right? And I think that's something that's an issue, and I've seen this. I'm like, this person's like, I'm going to coaching. I'm like, you really need a therapist, right? I mean, this is not just management knowledge and skills, right? This is really mental health issues. It's either depression or it's anxiety or it's things that really you need a therapist for. So I think you have to, and so, there's a mentor, and that's a certain set of, I think, outcomes. There's coaches, which are another set of outcomes that you're looking for. And there's a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. It's another set of outcomes. And I'm not sure where I stand with the boundaries are fuzzy.
Yes,
I think we can kind of leave it there, right?
Yeah.
Be careful. I always like, if there's a gap between where you're at and where you think you want to be, look at any or all of the three, right? I'll bet you really, to be the most successful professional you can be, probably a large chunk of us, myself included, could use a little therapy, a little mental health, right? We can all use, I've never seen, I don't know, maybe I'm blind to this, but I've seen so many great mentoring relationships, right? That I think every successful person that I know has not only one mentor, but multiple mentors. And then they turn around and mentor other people behind them, right?
Yeah.
That just seems to be a real common thread. Even introverted people I know have mentors and do some mentoring, right? Maybe there are other introverts, right? But it works. And I love this kind of pay it forward system of mentoring. So I think everybody can use some of that, and I think everybody can use some coaching. So it's really, I think, all three, part of a healthy diet of becoming, the best business person, the best entrepreneur, the best human, right? That you can be effective at work, be effective in your life, right? Leave the world a better place than you found it, right? What's wrong with that?
And it's an investment, not only in your career, but in your life. Yeah.
Cool.
What do you say?
All right.
Wrap this one?
Wrap it up, Bela. Well, listeners, again, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Unconventional Path. I think that we found this really interesting and thought-provoking, and we hope that you did too. As always, if you have questions about what we discussed, or you disagree or agree strongly, please get in touch with us. Our mail is bela.and.mike at gmail.com, and we read everything. We're happy to read everything.
Yeah, and please hit that follow or subscribe button in your favorite podcasting application so you don't miss an episode. So signing off from upstate New York. See you soon, Mike.
Thanks, Bela. It's always great to spend some time with you, learn something, and have a few laughs from over here in Münster, Germany, as we say, auf Wiedersehen.